Hey, welcome back to MovieReviewsToGo.com. My name is Henry, and today I've got a little something special going on. I'm going to start talking about series of movies that I love to watch. One of those series? 007, James Bond. I have watched these movies from, as long as I can remember, from when I was a kid till now. Enjoyed them all the way from Sean Connery all the way to Daniel Craig. And I want to share my thoughts with you about the whole series. I'm going to start with the first one, Dr. No, and move on to the end. So hopefully this will be a series that you'll enjoy. If you haven't seen James Bond, tune in, because this will be good information for you, especially from some of the older James Bonds that you may be like, I don't know if I want to watch that. I'm going to talk about the good, the bad, and some of the things that I enjoyed from each movie. So stay tuned for that. Also, I'm going to add a new playlist for just James Bond movie reviews. So I'm going to do this once a week. I'm going to wear my nice James Bond t-shirt, and we're going to talk James Bond. So today, Dr. No, directed by Terrence Young, who also directed a couple more James Bond movies afterwards, and stars Sean Connery. You've got Ursula Andress as the Bond girl. And then that's pretty much it. I mean, those are the main characters in the movie. Then you've got your evil Dr. No. One of the things that I found interesting with this movie, which I'll get more into as I discuss the review of this, but it's just the type of casting that they did for the movie. Anyways, this movie starts off with British government agent, I would have to assume, that gets killed. It disappears, him and his assistant, and no one knows where they are. They send James Bond to go investigate what's going on. We meet James Bond, of course, as we know him, the card playing, smoking, drinking his dry martini, shaken, not stirred. It's very important. And from there, we get to see who he is. Right off the bat, we see Sean Connery. We get to see his clean-cut, very tough-looking guy. I gotta admit, of all of the James Bond we've had, Sean Connery and Daniel Craig have probably had the more chiseled, brute, mean type of James Bond characters, but they're again very refined. We meet Sean Connery playing cards, meet up with the girl, yada yada yada. He then goes on a mission to Jamaica, which is where the agent disappeared. From there, he discovers, there's a plot to create this nuclear weapon, and he basically goes and stops and the bad guy saves the day. I'm not going to give you a lot of the details of that. I want you to watch it for yourself, but that's the gist of the movie, and it's a pretty cool. I rewatched it the other night. I watch these movies like every year. I swear, I start from Dr. No and I go all the way to the latest James Bond once a year. I love these movies so much. Every time I watch it, I think I catch new things that really interest me about the movie than the last time I saw it. Now, this movie was filmed back in 1962. So back then, obviously things were different in our society between men and women, and I was very surprised at some of the liberties and things that they got away with, even in movies, let alone in the society of how women were treated and so forth. One of the things that I noticed right away is when he meets up with Ursula Andress. So this is the Bond girl. Her name is Honey Rider. Now it's funny because all the Bond girls, as you know, will have a innuendo type name, and we'll get into those as we review some of the other Bond movies. But Honey Rider is the Bond girl, and of course it's the first time we meet her. She's coming out of the water in her bikini, glistening in the sun and being all sexy, right? That's just the Bond girl. And James Bond, of course, has to, hey, I gotta go introduce myself. Hey, Bond, James Bond. One of the things I noticed about her is she plays this ditzy blonde type woman. Like, at one point she acts like she's someone that can take care of herself or defend herself, but I didn't really buy it. Like, there was a part in there where James Bond pretty much, I wouldn't try to do anything to you or whatever, that I'm an honorable man or whatever, and she's like, I'd like you to try type thing. Like, she's threatening him like she can defend herself. She pulls out her knife, and I'm like, okay, none of that seemed convincing at all. Like, first of all, when she pulled out her knife, didn't seem threatening at all. When she's like, I'd like you to try type, I don't know, I just like it didn't sell me on the fact that she could be the type of person that could defend herself. Some of the later Bond girls, yeah, they made it work. With her, no. And then they almost made her character feel like a child almost. Like, look at this, I am collecting clamshells or, conch shells. This is worth $50 in Miami. Almost like a little kid, like, hey, I'm going to go and sell this in eBay now or whatever. It just seemed weird. Like, okay, why are they putting her in here? Obviously, she's the eye candy, and that's why. But back then, that was a lot more prominent type of a thing, I guess. And then in this one, James Bond has no qualms about hurting a woman, slapping her around, or, threatening to break her arm or anything like that. Like, it's not what we do nowadays. The acting, Sean Connery, I thought he did really well. In fact, whenever he delivered his lines, they worked. He's got his little quick one-liners. Whenever he did his fight scenes, some of them were kind of cheesy, but overall they were okay. And then his acting was just fine. I thought he did a good job with his acting. The other people in the movie, like the extras, the supporting actors, even Ursula Andress, the Bond girl, I don't know. They were just kind of like, wow. They put all the acting or focus on Sean Connery, and everybody else is just like the background, which, maybe back then the star was the star and everybody else was like, all right, we're just here for the supporting cast and we're just kind of, making the movie around you. But I feel like nowadays when you get a supporting cast, like especially like a leading lady or some other actors that help move the story along, they're really good actors and you just buy into everything. Here, it was like he's the only good actor they could afford or had in the movie, and everybody else is like, yeah, you just come in. Some of the lines just not delivered just very well, and I was just like, oh, okay. That brings a lot of cheese factor into the movie, when you see poor acting in some of the other characters. The story, it dragged on a little bit. The beginning went really well when you saw what happened to the guy, and then James Bond introducing him and then flying out. But when he's investigating and then getting to the point where, he meets up with the villain, I thought that part just dragged on a little too long. They could have cut down on some of that stuff. Now, to finish, I want to talk about the villain. I mean, we lead up to this point of the movie where we finally get to see who he is. They've been very, quiet about him and everything. And when we finally meet him, he's really not as menacing as you thought he was going to be or they led up to being. And I was kind of let down about it. Now, here's the other thing. A couple of times during the movie, with the villain included, they basically had Asian people as characters in the movie. But guess what? They weren't Asian. They were basically white people made out to look like they were Asian. There was a girl in later on in the movie, or halfway through the movie, she played an Asian girl. But she was clearly a white woman with makeup to make her look like she was Asian. The same thing with Dr. No. He's supposed to be this Hong Kong raised man, and he looks Asian makeup wise, but he is not. He's a white guy. So they did this a lot back then, I guess. Anyways, the movie was fun. It was a good start. I mean, obviously it did well. They continued the series from there on out. I did have fun with it. There are some cheesy factors in there. Looking at it today, we're going to laugh at a lot of stuff that they did or how they did it, even though back then it was meant to be a serious action thriller, right? But in the end, it's fun. I love it. And it's a great start to James Bond. I love Sean Connery. He is probably one of my favorite James Bond with Pierce Brosnan and now Daniel Craig. Probably my best James Bonds that I like in the series. So tune in on Sundays when I give you my next James Bond movie. I'm going to do this every week. Next week we're going to do From Russia with Love, also with Sean Connery, and we'll get to see what he does there, and I'll give you my thoughts on that movie. I love that I can do this for you guys. Please give me a like. It lets me know that you're enjoying what I'm doing. Also, if you're new to my channel, subscribe. I want to be able to keep reaching people with these thoughts that I have and see if we're on the same page. So subscribe if you're new, especially. Again, thanks for coming. I really appreciate everyone that shows up to these videos on a weekly basis, and I hope that you're watching movies because I know that I am.